In a world where most people watch movies and then forget about them, three brave heroes join forces to watch them again and then talk about them. Join them in their epic journey as they go back in time, a decade and beyond, to revisit and break down films from a vast array of genres. Do these movies hold up over time? Are they classics? Find out on Retro Movie Roundtable. Starring your hosts, Brian Fry, Chad Robinson, and Russell Guest. Coming now to headphones in your ears. Welcome all you lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable. Welcome to the show where we watch movies and then talk about them. I'm your host, Russell Guest, and joining me today is my co-host, my good friend, Chad Robinson. Chad, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Russell.
It's raining here in Pittsburgh, Chad.
That is appropriate.
It is appropriate, but I'm not down. Do you know why I'm not down?
Why is that?
I think I feel like singing in the rain today.
Did you bring your umbrella?
I did, and I brought also first-time guest from another place where it rains a fair bit, from Seattle, Washington, Ray Castillo from the Retro Reviews podcast. Ray, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it and really enjoy your show. So I'm really honored to be a guest. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, we are excited to have you here. So, Ray, people may or may not know you, and I hope they get to know you because if you like our show, I promise you, you're going to like Ray's show too. Ray, tell people who you are, a little bit about yourself.
Like they said, my name's Ray, and me and my co-host Peter do a podcast weekly called Retro Reviews. It's very similar to Retro Movie Roundtable, which we review movies that are 10 years or older. But on our podcast, we don't go back any further than the year 1980. So a little caveat, a little difference there. And also we do a little segment just like shout outs in the very beginning. We talk about some different things, a little warm up. But yeah, so it's a weekly podcast and me and Peter volleyball back and forth about movies that we pick. And we don't know what movie either of us are going to pick. So it's very kind of surprising when we bring it up in the show. So yeah, so that's Retro Reviews, and I hope you guys enjoy us and give us a listen. Really appreciate it.
That is very exciting, and we want to know, what is it you do for a living?
I work at a nonprofit in Seattle, and I work, they have different sectors, and I work in like the child care sector, and I'm more of like the office manager, like registration, registrar type of stuff. But before I did that, I used to work with kids for like over like 15 years, whether it's after school care or summer camp, things like that, or like teaching. But yeah, so I changed my role up this year. So it's a little different office role for this year, which is very exciting and also very different for me. But yeah, so that's what I do now. I used to love working with kids, but like I said, I need something to switch it up a little bit. And yeah, so that's what I do. Very vaguely, but yeah.
No, that's great. Let's get a little feel for you. We're going to break the ice with some icebreakers here. So what's the last movie you saw?
The last movie I saw, I'll say in theaters, because I did one for our podcast, but I'll do one for it. In the theater, I saw Midsummer, the 2.5.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, also, okay, I won't say anything else. It's 2.5 hours. Just bring a seat cushion or something. It's just it's an interesting ride, yeah.
Ray likes this movie short, if I recall.
Yes, I am the person that likes my movies 90 minutes, and if it's any longer, there has to be a good reason. So I'm just super picky about that, and maybe because of my old age, I can't sit down for a long time anymore. I get a little antsy. Yeah,
that's a bit long. It's a horror movie, right?
Yeah, it's a horror movie. It's psychological horror movie. Yeah.
And Ray, what is your biggest guilty pleasure movie?
Wow. The one that came to mind when you wrote this in your show notes is the 2008 movie Jumper. I love that movie. It's on my iPad still. I think I can't delete it from there. It's just ingrained in my iPad now. If nobody is familiar with Jumper, it stars the amazing Hayden Christensen, Jamie Bell, and Rachel Bilson, and also Samuel L. Jackson's in it. And it's about this character that can basically, just like Nightcrawler, can like jump from place to place. So it's basically a movie based on that, and there's an interesting world around it, and it's 90 minutes long, which is perfect for me. And it's just a fun movie. It's very silly and dumb, but I always have fun with it, and it's fun to see Hayden Christensen in a movie that's not Star Wars. Yeah, I just really enjoyed this movie. It's really fun. It's one of my go-to airplane movies, or like car ride movies if I'm in the car for a while. But yeah, it's Jumper.
Oh, it's too bad you said not Star Wars, because I was about to like cue up Chad and say like, you know what? Anything that has Hayden Christensen and Sam Jackson in it, Chad's there.
Hey, I like Jumper. That's a good choice.
Okay. I haven't seen the movie. I only know the Third Eye Blind song. Is the song in the movie?
It is not.
No, it's not.
Lost
Yeah.
opportunity.
That would be awesome if that song wasn't. That'd be probably even make it better.
So what is your first movie that you went to without your parents, Ray?
Oh man, this was a fun one to go think about too. Cause I was thinking about it, and the only one that comes to mind right off the top of my dome was the 1995 film Species. It's sci-fi action horror movie. I went with a friend, and we bought, it was rated R, and I think I was like 14 at the no, I was 13 at the time. And we bought tickets for another movie. We went in. It's so weird how you just remember things so vividly. We bought tickets and we snuck into Species, and it was like the first time I think that I remember seeing like a nude woman in a movie, and I was like really like, whoa, my god! Like I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh my gosh, I feel really naughty right now as like a young teenager watching this movie without my parents, with my friends sneaking into a movie. It's just, yeah, I've never seen it. I haven't seen it since, but I remember just having a fun time as a teenager doing that. And yeah, so Species is one of those movies for sure.
Getting away with something. My first movie that I watched without my parents, I went with a friend, and we went to Jingle All the Way. We were a lot younger than that, though. So, yeah, a little bit different than Species. Different experience.
Yeah, just a tiny bit.
Yeah. Another one that's going to be a hard-hitting question. This one's tough. This one's tough. Who's your favorite director?
Oh, I had two I was going to pick from, but it's either day you catch me picking one of these. It's either Darren Aronofsky or Rian Johnson, but today I just picked Rian Johnson. I like Rian Johnson. I was a big fan of him for Brick, and I really love The Brothers Bloom. That's one of my favorite films that he's done. A lot of people not seem so, but I love that movie. And also, like, of course, he did Looper, and also, of course, The Last Jedi. I love Rian Johnson. Anything that he directs, I'm definitely going to be seeing that weekend, or streaming it, whatever he's doing, and wherever platform it's at. But definitely Rian Johnson right now.
Looper was so good, and I think The Last Jedi had an overreaction to it. People complained so much for no good reason. So,
yeah, well, internet overreacting was something that's so weird. It's so out of character.
That's true. Yes, here in 2019.
I know what.
Yeah. So, Chad, what movie are we doing today, sir?
We are going to be Singing in the Rain.
All right. Singing in the Rain comes out in 1952. It grosses $7.1 million. There's some various numbers on that. Obviously, it had more than one trip to the box office after the Oscar season. It actually returned. That was pretty common for the time. So, to the best of my numbers, according to thenumbers.com, they have this at number 5 on the box office for that year. And it comes in behind The Quiet Man and in front of The World in His Arms. If you're wondering what the number 1 movie that year was, it was The Greatest Show on Earth, and that's not with Hugh Jackman. IMDb gives Singin' in the Rain a pretty strong rating of 8.3, and if you think that's a strong rating, wait till you see the critics' tomato meter. They give it 100%. That's about as good as it gets, isn't it, Chad? Doesn't get any higher than that.
I mean, that's impressive. There's not that one guy trying to make a name for himself.
Yeah, even the Gettysburg Address had a lower rating. There was a guy like Jebediah Atkinson who wrote in and said it sucked. So
yeah, John Wilkes Booth wasn't a big fan.
Oh yeah,
so I've heard.
Not too soon. And the audience score gives us 95%. So it gets some hardware. It gets nominated for some Oscars. It gets nominated for Best Supporting Actress from Gene Hagen and Best Original Music Score. And the Golden Globes, it comes away with the winner for Best Actor in a Motion Picture. Donald O'Connor gets it. It's weird. This movie kind of grows over time, and it has a lot of legacy awards. So the American Film Institute, AFI's 100 Years of Movies, number 10. AFI's 100 Laughs, they put it at 16. Then 100 Passions, they put it at number 16. AFI's 100 Years of 100 Songs, Singing in the Rain's number 3. Make 'Em Laughs, 49. Good Morning, 72. And an AFI's list of top 10 musicals, they ranked it number 1. And AFI's 100 Years of Movies 10th anniversary edition, they upped it to number 5 in 2007. So pretty good love from the AFI on this one. Ray, had you seen Singin' in the Rain before? What was your background on this one?
Yeah, I saw Singing in the Rain for the first time when I was in college in a music movie studies class. And this was a movie that came on. I'd never seen it. I don't think I've even heard of it. And I saw it, and I was just like, wow, this movie is. And in my classroom, it was like a kind of like a small theater. So it got a big screen. It had like theater seating. So it was, I think, the perfect setting for this movie. And you have pretty good sound in the school theater that I was at. And the movie just like, yeah, that's the first time I saw it. Just blown away by it, and just I thought I would never at the time thought I would never like anything like this, but totally caught me by surprise.
So not normally a musical fan then?
Not really, but after this movie, I definitely sought out like the favorites, like not the critically acclaimed ones after this, and just rented them on Netflix or went to Blockbuster and rented them and just try to, like West Side Story and all that stuff, the classic ones, and just try to see what else was out there to get my knowledge up.
What was it like returning to it today?
I haven't seen it in a few years, and this movie is awesome. It's just still so much fun. It goes by so fast, an hour and a half. That's my time frame, and it's perfect timing. And it's just so fun. And like I was trying to take notes on it while watching it. Even though I seen it before, I really couldn't because I didn't want to miss anything because I knew what was coming up. And it's just a great fun film.
That's great, Chad. How about you? What's your take on this one?
Yeah, I have a very similar story to Ray there. I saw this movie during a movie appreciation class. I had finished my major in college, and they said, you still need more hours to graduate, so that's what I did, along with a bunch of gym classes. This came up. I do like musicals, with the exception of Cats. That's a weird thing for me. The people as animals thing just terrifies me, not my thing. But yeah, so Singing in the Rain came up. I was intrigued. I was a little nervous because of the year it was made. It's like, I don't know. I'm not a big Wizard of Oz fan right around that time frame. But I loved it. I appreciated it. So the class did its job. And, watching it again here recently, I was very excited to show my wife because she likes Chicago a lot. She likes Phantom of the Opera. It's like, well, here's one that you haven't seen, and it's just really exciting. I'm anxious for you to see it.
Did Little Belle watch it too?
She did. She had an interesting reaction during the stunt scene because when Gene Kelly got punched, she cried.
Wow.
And kind of recoiled. I'm like, no, they were acting. It was fun. The scene was set up. But she started getting entranced with a lot of the dance numbers. She's like, oh, people can do that.
That's right. Not just penguins and happy feet. For me, I had actually never seen Singing in the Rain. It's been on my list to see for a really long time, and this is one of the most rewarding things for me in this podcast is to go back and get to all those movies that you should see, but you haven't seen yet, and I loved it. I mean, it is very charming enough at the time, as well as I do love musicals. I'll seek them out. I love music theater, and there aren't that many musicals that I don't enjoy unless they just have a super depressing story behind them. So I really enjoyed this, and I get what all the praise is about. So without further ado, though, we're going to have to spoil this movie. And so when we return from these messages, we're going to come back and get into it.
President Donald J. Trump here from the White House. America, I get so tired of listening to all the fake news out there. They're always treating me very unfairly. It's shameful, really. It's a shame I get so tired of all the news that I've taken to listening to podcasts. There are a lot of fake podcasts out there too, pretty much any of them from CNN. But one that all of America seems to be able to agree on, including myself, is the Retro Movie Roundtable podcast. Stop worrying about the investigations, what's going on in Russia, go to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast from, and give them a shiny gold 5-star review. Comment below, let them know how to make the show even greater, like them on Facebook, reach out to them at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. Maybe someday they will be lucky enough to review my tremendous acting performances and Home Alone 2, Lost in New York. I was a terrific star of that movie, and the Academy Awards rigged the Oscars that year to exclude me. It's too bad, really. It's very bad. But you know what isn't bad? The Retro Movie Roundtable podcast. Thank you, America, and you're welcome.
Welcome back, and as mentioned, there will be spoilers that lie ahead, so that was your final warning. So, Ray, why don't you remind people who haven't seen Singing in the Rain since 1952, what happens in it?
I was sort of very lazy about this project because I want to talk about it more, and I give like the whole summary. So I'm just gonna be very brief. I hope you don't mind, and I'm just gonna read really quickly the IMDb summary. I know it's really lazy, but I think it's a perfect summary for this film because I think there's a lot to talk about too. So it's just a silent film production company and cast make a difficult transition to sound. I think it's a very simple summary. It's not what I think. There's more to this movie, but that is the basic premise of this film that IMDb has.
Not a problem. Obviously, I think we also want to say it's also a love story. It's a comedy. It's also obviously music. So it does a lot of things at once. Ray, how is it for you as a romance story?
I think, like you said, it does everything. This movie encapsulates everything. It's so great, and I think the love story is really fun, not fun. It's really nice. It's really genuine, I think, and it's very Hollywood, it's very classic Hollywood, which this movie is. And the song where Gene Kelly and, oh my god, Debbie Reynolds are singing like on the set, like transitioning from set to set, singing the love song. It's so beautiful and just whimsical and just like very romantic, and it's just it's just beautiful. And I think the love story is very simple in this movie, but it's done so well. And you know, simple is probably the best at times, and this movie does it so well. And I really love it. It doesn't have the love story, like drag its feet for the movie. Like it's really written in there, well inserted. The actors and actresses do such a great job. Gene Kelly and David Reynolds do such a great job of it. Yeah, so I think the love story in this is very good.
Now, Chad, you've seen more romantic comedies than any human being I know. How does this differ than a lot of the other ones that you see today?
I think I put this more in the Princess Bride type category for me. The Princess Bride has a lot of things going on. Yes, maybe at the center it is a romance, but it's got action, it's got adventure, it's got comedy. This has just great routines. There's fun quips. The set designs are very nice. The costuming, just everyone's having fun constantly. And so while the romance is important, it's not the thing for me that draws me to this movie.
Interesting. Maybe I'm a softie, but actually this is one of the parts of it I enjoyed the most, and I didn't think that it dragged as much as a lot of today's romantic comedies goes. Perhaps to Ray's point, it's a short movie, and obviously music plays a big part of it, so you don't have to go through this kind of obligatory lull where your protagonist kind of screws up, and then we go through this whole thing that leads back to the big motion that wins the girl back over, and that can be done well enough if it doesn't trudge around in it for too long, but this really doesn't. I mean, it's a very brief moment where he basically says that I'm going to put you up on stage and you have to sing behind this person who's going to get all the credit for what you're doing, and she's crying, and it's literally, I don't know, 4 minutes later that they resolve this, and it's a happy ending.
Yeah, if that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I feel like for me, the singing parts in this movie, the musical parts, are what also like move the story along too, and like make the characters' relationships grow or a situation like develop. Like I think of some musicals, like the musical part is there but doesn't really explain what is going on in the show. I mean, the movie, or doesn't like forward the plot. It's just there, and then like, okay, now let's get to the plot. And it's like it doesn't feel like that at all. It just transitions so well to musical, to scripted, and then back to musical. It's so well done, and I love that too about it.
Well, it's interesting, and as we might talk a little more on later, these songs weren't written specifically for this story, and actually the songs came first, and then they constructed a story to work around that. So that's kind of, if you're looking for a modern-day comparison, that's kind of like what Across the Universe did with Beatles songs, or Mamma Mia with all ABBA's songs. In this case, these were projects of largely head of the music department. His name is Arthur Freed. And so it's a collection of a lot of older songs, many of which had been used before. And we had seen some of them in movies. Like, this is the 7th movie that has the song Singin' in the Rain on it, but good luck naming many of those other movies at today's time. It's kind of weird how we think of these things as like Good Morning or Make 'Em Laugh or this, but really they were pieced together to create a cohesive whole. So it's kind of interesting how they did that. Does that show? Would you say that is evident, Chad?
No, I had no idea all but 2 of these songs weren't original to the movie. I always assumed Singing in the Rain was created for this film. And actually there was a point where the orchestras asked during the movie to play this song, and they know it. My initial thought was, why do they know this? But when you find out, these are songs that have been around for a little bit, it's like, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's interesting that it turns out so tight. And there's a certain part late in the movie, I'll go straight to it. I mean, I might come back to it later, but the Broadway melody is one of those ones that I didn't see it fitting this movie. And that to me is the one true moment that makes me go like, wait, we're in New York now? What's going on? And how does this relate to anything? And then like it ends and you're just like, what just happened there? So were you pulled out of it at any moment, Ray, or does it all just go together just fine?
I agree that whole song, that whole that musical number does seem really forked in, or just like, okay, this song is good, we have to put it in. How are we gonna put it in? Just do this. And it feels like it's like that. It's like kind of a little bit half baked a little bit, but it still, I think for me, works. Isn't, like I said, it moves along the plot. It doesn't like just, it's not just it's plopped in there, doesn't move the story along, moves it along in some. And for me too, this movie is like a carpet ride. It's very whimsical. I'm along for the ride right from the get go. Right when the opening, you see all three of them singing in the rain with the yellow coats on and the umbrellas and stuff. Like, I'm all for it. So whatever they wanted to do, I bought in 100%.
Broadway Melody set up a great punchline though. After 17 minutes of everything played out, just hearing, I can't visualize it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I did look over to Mary and say, like, I'm sorry, am I not paying attention? Am I having like an ADD moment? Like, what's happening?
Yeah, it didn't help that Donald O'Connor, he wasn't available, so that's why he's missing for that part. And Debbie Reynolds wasn't a good enough dancer, so they filled in someone else. It kind of did miss the rest of the cast.
Yeah. It was a strange moment in there, but one of the things that I have to admit, this is going to sound silly, but again, having not seen it before, they opened up the movie, as Ray had mentioned, on Singing on the Rain, and Debbie Reynolds and Gene Kelly and Donald O'Connor are there in the raincoats with the umbrellas, and they sing pretty much 30 seconds of Singing in the Rain, and it fades out, and I was like, wait, that's not it for that title track, is it? No, don't worry, you'll hear it twice more. So, Ray, did you like the beginning of this movie? Kind of, it was like a flashback where we have our lead actor, Don Lockwood, coming down the red carpet and strangely giving an interview on the red carpet. I don't think we see that very often today.
Yeah, I just like, I think the opening, that whole scene is really just sort of silly. Because, like, when you first watch the movie, you think Don Lockwood, and who's the character that he's with? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, like they're supposed to be love interests, and you're kind of like, oh, these both are together because they're like superstars. And he gives this interesting backstory, very Citizen Kane-esque, flashback, and this is how I came this, and it's very, very, very funny. I don't know, I like it a lot. It, as you can tell, I'm probably gonna like everything about this movie, but I like the opening a lot. Like I said, very classic Hollywood. I just love that part too.
I made me think, how long would red carpets be? Because the E! Channel puts these things on for like 2 hours before an award show. How long would they be if like Joan Rivers is standing there, which she's not around anymore. I guess it's Kathy Griffin now who does these sorts of things. But how long would a red carpet be if everybody who came up and they were like, it's like, Kim Kardashian, please tell us your whole life story now.
Well, the Kim Kardashian story would be like 2 minutes long because like, yeah, I made a sex tape. And that's it. And I'm famous.
It's true. And I married a genius.
Yeah, exactly.
That entire scene for the setup, though, that was great satire. I love when Don's talking like this elite celebrity of, I do everything, dignity, always dignity, and it shows him doing clown routines. And, he's talking about audiences everywhere adored us, and they're booing. Or my roles in these films were urbane, sophisticated, suave, and it shows him getting blown up in a hut marked explosives. Just everything he's saying is a complete fraud.
Yes, quite the overstatement. I particularly enjoyed when he meets Lena for the first time, and he's just a stuntman, so she's too good to talk to him. And he's like, Miss Lamont, I'm very glad to meet you. I'm the stuntman on this movie. And she like gives him this look as if. And then like 2 seconds later, like the head of the production company comes up and says, "You're doing a great job. We want to feature you in our next movie." Then all of a sudden she does a 180. No sooner has she done kicking him in the butt than turns around. It's just like, "Oh, now I'm interested." And that lays it on so thick. And in a way, that's Lena Lamont. Right off the bat, this is a very shallow, superficial character. And that's just the beginning.
Yeah, and right off the bat too, this is 1952, so it's very tongue in cheek about Hollywood at the time too. Which if this movie still resonates with now Hollywood too, people just like putting up a front and putting up like their best faces and the crowd going crazy, like Chad said in the beginning, like where they're all yelling and like hysterically like super happy to see their stars. So it's very resonant to nowadays too, just seeing that too, which I thought was interesting.
So what was your take when Don hops in the car with Kathy, and she is not taken. She either doesn't recognize him, or maybe I think she does recognize him, and she's just not she's just not going to fall for his star-like presence. I really liked her character right off the bat by kind of putting this Hollywood guy who gets everything he wants everywhere he goes and kind of putting him in his place and just reminding him, hey, you're a person and I'm a person too, and I'm not that impressed with you. I don't know, Chad, did you like her telling him off, sort of?
Yeah, it reminds me very much of her daughter. The first time Luke Skywalker met Princess Leia, it was just, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? Not, hey, you're here to rescue me. Same with Kathy Selden. Like, oh, you're a big movie star. So what? Get out of my car.
You're not a real actor. You're in movies.
I'm in cakes, but you're in movies.
Yeah, I did love that line. We're going to search. I searched every cake in town looking for you.
Yes. Cosmo has some great ones.
Cosmo is awesome. And don't you kind of feel bad for like Cosmo? Like everybody's going nuts over like 3 of these people who come on the red carpet. And then all of a sudden Cosmo gets out of a car and everyone's like, oh, we're not going to clap for this guy. He's a piano player. And then the next guy who comes out of the car, then they go crazy over. I thought that was an odd thing of how this guy had cut his teeth on the whole scene and everywhere he had been. These guys were equally talented, but Cosmo ends up being this like behind the scenes guy, and everybody just kind of like womp 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 when Cosmo comes on the scene. So that's kind of odd because he can do all the tap dancing, singing, and all the same stuff. So why is he not famous, Ray?
I think it's just some people. I think like Cosmo, I think is the engine to the car, and then Don is like that, like the shell of it. Like Cosmo's the one that makes the engine go. He makes it go fast, but everybody sees Don Lockwood, the super hunky man, and he's the shell of the car. So it's just, both of them together make our perfect pairing. They're peanut butter and jelly. They bring out I think they bring out the best of each other, just like Batman and Robin. And Cosmo too. You look at him, he looks like he's shorter in the movie. He's very skinny. Doesn't have that strong bone physique as Don Lockwood has. So I think probably that's why he's not as famous as probably he should be, because he's the one with all the talent. But that usually also another tongue-in-cheek thing in Hollywood. Like, just because you have all the talent, that means you're going to be the most famous person. It's probably going to be the person who can somewhat act or kind of go a little bit above and beyond, but also super hunky or super attractive.
Ah, that's interesting. So Don Lockwood's kind of like your like Taylor Swift who you put on stage, and like Cosmo's like that Swedish guy who's like written every pop song in the last decade, behind the music, who's making it all happen. Ah, that's,
exactly, yeah.
Huh.
He's Ed Sheeran.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, I hadn't considered that until now. This movie plays off of Hollywood so well. I also like the superficial Hollywood party that they have. I enjoyed how unenthused people were to be there to watch a movie, and how unimpressed they were at hello, this is a talking picture. I'm moving my lips to the sound of this movie. And everybody's just kind of laughing it off like, ha, that's ridiculous. That'll never pass. What do you think it would have been like, Ray, like being back there in the 1920s and film is being silent? What do you think it was like to all of a sudden not have to stop the action, go to a black screen and read white text, but to be able to appreciate movies in a way that it gets closer to theater in that way?
Yeah. I think it would have blown my mind. Be like, I don't have to read. Like, I could just like hear this person talking through like speakers or this record that's playing. It would just blow in my mind, I think, at the time, especially like all that technical stuff going into it. And like, for me, I haven't seen any in 2019. I've seen like Revelations like in theaters. Besides like maybe IMAX is maybe the next best thing that I always, every time I go to an IMAX movie, I'm like jaw dropped. Just like, this is so beautiful and sounds so great. And that's how I think I would feel if I went back to see a talkie as I call it back in the day, something I would see in the movie. So I think I would be just blown away. Like, oh my gosh, even if this person is just like reading off a script, and like I would be amazed by it.
It would be, if you think about it, because again, the theater is so much more lively to Kathy's point in this, and that silent movies, I have always, one thing that I do struggle with through some of them is when you go back and watch a silent movie, is the overacting is pretty strong, and they're kind of pantomiming everything out to the point where everything's got to be exaggerated because that's their only means of conveying what's happening in the scene. And it's interesting, once talkies come around, you don't have to try nearly so hard anymore with all the big animated gestures. I mean, if you want to be like Harpo and have animated gestures for the point of comedy, then you can. But I mean, there's so much more depth that your stories can go into. One of the early ones I can think of is Nosferatu, was just like an early telling of Dracula, and you're amazed how little ground they can cover. But if you think about it, half of the movie's a black screen with white text on it, so you lose a lot of time in that.
Yeah, that's true.
One of the comedy things about this is seeing the people struggle to go from silent movies to that. Chad, did you enjoy the scene where we see Don Lockwood and Lena Lamont attempting for the first time to create an actual talkie scene together?
Oh man, that was great, with Lena not understanding where the mic was and constantly turning her head back and forth, then moving the microphone into like a corsage and in her dress, and RF pulling the cord out and her falling off the bench. Yeah, that was all great, but it was fun hearing. Let me see if I can mimic this on my mic. Sound going in and out, and and even the final product of her fidgeting with the pearls in the movie. It was interesting, though, even with their first film that they show that everyone's going bananas over, you kind of see their lips are moving after the subtitles go, so it's kind of like those old Godzilla movies where it doesn't quite match up, even though the audience member's like, she's so refined, I think I'll kill myself.
Yes, and obviously they showed the result of that. Ray, did you like the follow-up of that? How the people were in the theaters actually responding to, like, this is the best that we could come up with, and the director's just sitting there with his hands over his face?
Yeah, it's so funny because they go into it and they're like, this movie's going to be great. Everybody's going to love it because we have these two mega stars, right? And then they go into it, and even though, I don't know, it feels like to me like even the producers didn't preview the movie themselves, like in a room together, smoking a bunch of cigarettes and drinking. Like, let's see if the audio, how's the audio sound? You know, they're like, no, it sounds great. Let's give it to a preview audience. And just like the audio's terrible. It's so funny, and they're all laughing at the screen, and they're all trying to hide under the hat, like under their coats and stuff. And it's just so funny, and it just shows you too, like, just because it's a talking movie at the time doesn't mean it was easy to do. Like, there's so much stuff that it needed to be more precise than anything probably now. And it kind of reminded me of like doing a podcast, like make sure your mic is good, the levels are right, you're not hitting it and not scratching it. It really reminded me of that too, which is nothing to do with the movie, but just reminded me of that too, which is really funny.
Oh yeah, definitely have some painful moments. The infamous Black Hawk Down episode was a second. We did the entire 90-minute podcast, and I looked down and I didn't record my own track, so I had at the time John and Brian talking to each other with long, huge gaps of anything I would say completely not being there. And I called them back. I was like, "Yeah, we got a Black Hawk Down."
I've done that before too.
Oh, that makes me feel so much better then.
Yeah.
Imagine Donald O'Connor. That literally happened to him for Make 'Em Laugh. He did all that, wound up being hospitalized, and they said, yeah, the tape got damaged, so can you do it again?
Oh, man. You know what's funny about that one? I kept sitting there going like, man, this guy's a real artist and know how to land and all that stuff. This looks painful. He's just like landed on his back. That looks like it would hurt. But I mean, he must know how to fall in such a way that it doesn't. He's a real artist, like an acrobat or a gymnast. And turns out later after reading about it, nope, that's a concrete floor, and he just ached and hurt and was in a lot of pain the next day.
That's a chain smoker doing wall runs.
That's so crazy. Yeah, and the shoes that he's doing that with are just like classic flat foot, like old school like dress shoes. And like, oh my god, like I could barely like get out of my house without like comfortable tennis shoes now after playing like sports in high school and college a little bit. So it's like I don't know how he would have done it. Like Chad said, like him just smoking a bunch of cigarettes too.
Hey, he does 2 wall backflips and then jumps through a plaster wall, and again land like he's giving himself massive rug burn, no doubt, and landing on his knees. And there was one moment where he was dancing really low again with Don Lockwood, and I'm sitting there going like, man, how do adult men do that? That looks like it just hurts your knees.
So, oh yeah.
Yeah, when I first saw the movie, I thought it was when I first saw it back when I first saw it. I thought it was like a not that actor. I thought it was like, oh, it had to be like a stunt double, right? And then I looked it up later on, like, wow, that was actually that actor. It blew my mind.
Well, that's actually kind of an interesting point that this was playing off of, because in the 50s, it's very common for an actor It's almost a prerequisite. You better be able to play multiple instruments. If you can speak another language, all the better. If you can do Shakespeare, that's great. You should be able to dance. You should be able to tap dance. You should be able to ride a horse. You should be able to do fencing. And the degree of what they would ask for an actor to do back then was so much greater than it was now. And obviously computers help fill in a lot of stuff today. But also, there wasn't this culture of, oh, Lionel Barrymore is your father? We're going to put you in a movie. And I'm not like sliding like our grandfather, so I'm not like sliding Drew Barrymore specifically by doing that. But I mean, there's a lot of people in Hollywood, whether it be like Nicolas Cage. There's just so many people they're there because their dad was somebody. It's kind of interesting to see that difference in the 50s. And they're kind of poking fun at the people who went before them as if to say, look how empty their skill set is. And they were delivering lines by just saying, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. And it's like, he can't even remember his lines. And they were kind of poking fun at that. So in a way, this movie is kind of celebrating how far movie acting had come.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I totally see that.
Chad, why don't you give us a cast rundown?
Sure thing. First, we have Gene Kelly. He plays Don Lockwood, who was a stuntman turned suave movie star. He's leading the production and working with Lena Lamont. So he's half of that duo. Gene Kelly winds up, he does choreography for a lot of movies as well as directs and acts, Anchors Away, Hello Dolly, things like that. Debbie Reynolds, I've already mentioned, that is Carrie Fisher's mom, if you didn't know. She plays Kathy Selden, who is the love interest for this film. Kathy winds up being Lena's voice. That's her main point, because she has this beautiful singing voice, even talking voice, and Lena has this screeching voice. So Kathy's needed to be the behind-the-scenes kind of star. Donald O'Connor, he plays Cosmo Brown. That's Don's lifelong pal, who becomes the head of Monumental Pictures music department. He's the piano player. There's Jean Hagen, who plays Lena Lamont, the other half of Lockwood and Lamont. She's a silent film star and this refined character who just has this horrendous voice. And so a lot of the movie surrounds the fact of, what are we going to do about Lena? She can't sing, she can't act, she can't dance. What was it?
She's a triple threat.
She's a triple threat, yeah. Yeah. I do find it interesting. I'll throw this in. Jean Hagen got this part. They wanted Judy Holliday, but she wasn't available. She just won an Oscar. So Jean Hagen, who was her understudy, did an impression of Judy Holliday and got the part.
Perfect.
Millard Mitchell, he plays R.F. Simpson. His initials actually refer to Arthur Freed. Also uses one of Freed's favorite expressions. Can't quite visualize it. We mentioned it earlier for Broadway Melody. But he's kind of the dopey producer. He can easily be tricked into things.
But likable.
Yes, he's very likable. Douglas Fowley, he plays Roscoe Dexter. He's the director of Don and Lena's films. And finally, Rita Moreno. She plays Zelda Zanders. She is Lena's friend. She kind of serves as Tattletale. She's introduced as like this flapper star early in the movie.
I also want to point out Sid Charisse, the dancer, who gets a lot of screen time, and she's very elegant. Also, the thing I have to point out, Gene Kelly, Pittsburgh's own Gene Kelly. So Chad and I do this podcast out of Pittsburgh, so we want to call it a local. So
Nice.
Yeah. And to this day, if you get on Rain Delay at the Pittsburgh Pirates game, they put up screen footage from Singing in the Rain.
Yep.
They like to honor that. I don't know if people know that or not, but I didn't connect that before. I used to just think like, oh, it's raining. And then you realize that's on. You're like, well, that seems like something they'd do anywhere. But turns out, no, there's actual local connection. So fun fact there.
That's cool.
Yeah. When Howard Keel was the possible lead, the writers actually tried to create a Western story. This whole movie could have been a whole nother thing. And it was around Gene Kelly that they kind of chose to go with a different story where it was a vaudeville background who could survive the transition of going to silent movie and then from silent movie into talkies. So without Gene Kelly, you're looking at a cowboy rootin' tootin' Western buckaroo bonsai time. So Ray, do you want to see that movie instead?
I think we saw that movie in this movie for just like a couple of seconds when he's like talking about his past and being the stunt double. I think that was probably the movie that they're gonna make.
Good point. That might be a tip of the hat there to exactly that. I didn't think about that. Early pre-production, Judy Garland, June Allison, and Ann Miller were all considered for the role of Kathy Selden, but they were all considered too old by that time. Judy Garland you would certainly know from Wizard of Oz. Jane Powell and Leslie Caron were also briefly considered for that, and instead Debbie Reynolds gets cast. She's a newcomer. We haven't really gotten into it yet. Ray, do you like Debbie Reynolds here?
Oh, she's awesome in this movie. She's adorable. She is really good at dancing, even though like that wasn't her forte. I remember reading something, I think it was the IMDb facts, that like said two things were the hardest: giving birth and doing this movie, because it was so taxing on her body and so exhausting. So it was just, you could tell like they all had fun doing it, and especially her just smiling, and just, it must be so hard to do everything she did, try to be a triple threat with like the singing, the dancing, and the acting, and just, yeah, she's great in this movie. I love her a lot in this movie.
And you're not kidding that she was working hard. She was only 19 when they cast her, and she still lived with her parents, and she commuted a long commute to the set, and she had to wake up at 4 a.m. to ride 3 different buses to get there to avoid the commute so that she could be there on time, and that she would end up sleeping in the middle of the day on set because she was getting home so late, because many of these shoots would end, well into the night, and she was really pushing herself. And as you mentioned, learning to dance, there's an unhappy story, unfortunately, where Gene Kelly yells at her and was very hard on her for not being able to dance to the level that he wanted, and she was crying, and a famous Fred Astaire later finds her crying in the studio, and he continues to help her and coach her with her dancing to help her through this movie. Again, and she doesn't look like a novice here, does she, Ray?
No, she doesn't at all. It's funny, like Hollywood, the whole classic Hollywood. Oh yeah, Fred Astaire found her, and like started talking to her. It's just kind of crazy. If I met Fred Astaire, like, oh my gosh, you're Fred Astaire. Like, but that's really cool that he came up, and and that's what I read too. Like Gene Kelly is sort of a hard person to work with, but he kind of makes fun of himself in this movie too, about like being himself a little bit, which is kind of I guess interesting and humbling. I guess maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, Gene Kelly doesn't sound like he was quite as charming as he was in this movie. I was a little bit disappointed to find out that he was kind of a taskmaster drill sergeant. And again, it's old Hollywood. They're not known for treating their women actors very nice. I think it's always funny. Kate McKinnon plays this silver screen actor from the 50s, and she always goes over the top with it, but she's like, oh yeah, they fed us a diet of lead paint between sets, and they paid you? I was just slapped.
Yeah, Gene Kelly does seem remorseful about that, though. Like other later interviews, he said he's very surprised that Debbie Reynolds still talked to him. Like you guys said, she was a novice. She was a gymnast and didn't have any dancing experience. So kudos to Fred Astaire there for finding her curled up underneath a piano. What a visual there.
Yeah, seriously.
So I had not had any other Debbie Reynolds experience, so this is my only experience going in, and it's not fair to assume that a kid would be like their parent, but for some reason I came in expecting Carrie Fisher. I would say she's kind of got a rebel kind of, well, yes, I laid that on thick without thinking about it, but she's fiery. I like her personality a lot, but in a way, her mother's not, or at least in this role, she's not like Carrie Fisher, so I wasn't really sure what to expect when I got in, and she's just a big sweetheart, and I really liked her here. So.
Oh, see, I definitely found some of that Carrie Fisher attitude, especially when they first got together, and she's just blowing him off. To me, I kind of saw Carrie in that role, but you haven't seen Charlotte's Web, Russell?
I have seen Charlotte's Web, but we don't get to see Debbie Reynolds doing her thing. That's some kind of pig, though.
Yeah. Humble, radiant, all that jazz.
Yeah. Sid Charisse, I want to talk about this a little bit. For all the crap that I gave the Broadway ballet for not fitting, it's cinematically really rich, and it's a beautiful scene, and it's like they had this beautiful concept and they didn't know how to put it in the movie, or what movie they should put it in, so they put it in this movie. But despite that, it's really ambitious. Did you say it was 17 minutes long, Chad?
I did, yes.
Wow, I did not actually have a time on it, so it's actually longer than I thought. But let's talk about that for a second, and about the merits. What are the good things about Broadway Melody? Ray, it's a pretty experience, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, it's an incredible experience. It's just the way it just where he's on the conveyor belt. It's crazy how much time it took, time to make that set and put all that effort in, and just everybody has to be choreographed, right place, right time. It's probably not maybe several takes. I don't know. Maybe it took a lot of takes, but I don't know. Film was really expensive back then. It actually still is now, but I bet it was really expensive back then to make a movie. So you only had, I'm guessing, maybe a certain amount of time. But yeah, I think it's awesome. Even though, like you said, it does feel, that's the only part of the movie I think is probably weak, is that whole scene. But I think it's really just fun. It just, for me, like I said, I'm along for the ride. I'm totally into it. I love when they go into the club and he starts dancing with the woman, and it's just really cool. I love people. I just love seeing people dance too, that have just seeing people dance in general is just fun, especially people with so much talent as the people in this movie. Because I used to be really into breakdancing growing up, and just watching I always amazed myself watching the footwork in this movie, and they do a really great job, zooming out, have it zoomed out so you see their feet moving and doing the steps. I think a lot of movies nowadays, a movie just kind of step it up. A lot of the shots are zoomed in, but then they zoom out when they want to focus on the foot, and then but they zoom back into the upper body, and it's I don't want to see that. I want to see the footwork. I want to see how much choreograph it took to make that scene. And this movie just it's very wide. You see everything going on the screen, so much to look at, and particularly that scene is just really cool. I think it's really, really awesome.
That's a good point. As someone who cannot dance, I really appreciate the wide array of dancing in this movie. As we talked in Broadway Melody, it's elegant. It's like ballet almost. But at the same time, I'm a sucker for that vaudevillian kind of when they're sitting there tap dancing and everybody's booing them off the stage. It's don't boo those guys. That's talented. I can't do that. I'm enamored with how fast their feet are moving and sync and stuff like that. And watching them play that violin, and passing it off, I'm aware that that's literally not how they're playing it, but still it's choreographed beautifully. And I'm sitting there going man, I don't know. And then people were unimpressed by it. So I guess audiences were tougher in the 20s. I don't know, maybe not, but I'm impressed by that. So
yeah,
this is a audio podcast for a reason, because I'm not much to look at, especially if I'm dancing. So my wife tells me that it's very robotic. So
I just think if you're having fun with it, it doesn't matter if you know how to dance. As long as just feeling the music, whatever jam it is, just go for it, man. Just let it all out.
Full blown Elaine Bennis over here. In creating this movie, as I mentioned, Arthur Freed came up with the idea of a back catalog of songs that he wanted to build around. So he brings in Nacio Herb Brown and Betty Comden and Adolph Green from New York to come up with a story to tie these together. And so they first refused the assignment. They didn't want to do it, and they thought that they had a contract that said anything that they did had to have all the lyrics in it. That they had to write all the lyrics for those songs, so that they weren't going to do it because they didn't have the control to do it. And it turned out their lawyer came back, and a new lawyer came back and said, well, actually, you do have the ability to do it. So they changed their mind, and they came to do it. So they ended up taking all the songs that had originally been done during silent films and put them to talkies, and they were popular audiences. So Comden and Green came up with an idea for this story, and they put them through a period of Hollywood in an era that was familiar with them. And so that scene that you're talking about, Ray, is something that they wanted to play off of. And so they just continued to work on the script, and they had 3 different openings. They had a silent movie premiere, they had a magazine interview with a star, as well as a star meets girl, and they couldn't figure out which way they wanted to go with it. They were running out of time, and Betty Comden's husband comes home from New York and says, just do all 3. And they did. So that's how this thing kind of came together. It seems so scattershot that I asked you earlier, does it seem like it's cohesive? But when you go back and look at it, I remember watching Across the Universe from the Beatles. I'm sitting there going first of all, this is all visually pleasant. I love the people involved, but what the heck's happening in this movie? None of this makes sense. This movie does a much better job.
Oh yeah, for sure. It totally does that. And the strong points are, of course, I think this entire movie has a lot of strong points, but of course the musical numbers. And I think kind of like the new Mission Impossible that came out. I think the director said they came up with him and Tom Cruise came up with the stunts first, and then they're okay, now we got to make a movie around it. And that movie is awesome, and the stunts are awesome in that movie. It kind of reminded me when you said that about this movie. They had the musical numbers, and then they built the movie around the musical numbers, which is really interesting. But I think it all works pretty much really well in this movie.
That's a good point. That's how Bond movies are actually made as well. They think about where they want to go, what they want to do, and then they go back and figure out how what villain it's going to be. So maybe it's not as uncommon as I think. To me it seems like you would start with a story or a book and you're like, man, what if this were a musical? What if we put music to this? And that's how my brain works. But clearly you can come from the opposite direction with some success.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when any maybe art form, it's sometimes kind of works better to work backwards too. Like we learned in Memento, you work backwards and it turns out to be a good movie or interesting movie.
So we talked about Gene Kelly not necessarily being the nicest guy on set, and Donald O'Connor also would confirm that, saying that he was afraid to mess up and was constantly worried about him yelling at him. And actually, Kelly held back on Debbie Reynolds because he knew she was new, even though he wasn't that nice to her either. But he especially laid in to Donald O'Connor. And he had a hard time with this, and so it's kind of funny. This chemistry that we see between them, this warmth, wasn't actually conveyed off set. So kind of when Gene Kelly mentions like to Lena Lamont, like I'm the world's greatest actor. In a way, Donald O'Connor, who was having a lot of tensions off set, was kind of actually doing that same thing because this was not all smiles behind stage. But they hide it well, don't they?
Yeah, they hide it very well. I think it could totally. That's acting, man. Like you think they're best friends on screen, and off screen they're just like totally not at all. Kind of reminds me like a sports athlete. Like maybe they don't get along with their team very well, but when they're on the court or they're on the field, like they work so well together. And I think that takes a lot of just chemistry and be professional too.
It does. So, Chad, what do you think about Gene Kelly as a director? Because we talked about his habits and how like he might not have the highest morale on set, but do you like his discipline to be able to put together all these different music numbers into a whole? Like, how do you feel like he does a visual side of things as well?
Yeah, just he hits every note for me. He is a perfectionist, like we've talked about. He was clearly hard on the actors. One of my favorite scenes in Good Morning took 40 shots. Debbie Reynolds talks about 14-hour days and her feet bleeding. But I think Gene Kelly recognized, hey, whenever we're doing these multiple actors on a screen, everything has to be synchronized. It needs to look right. Everything needs to be clean lines. I can't imagine how much of a nightmare a Broadway Melody was to get right. And they're just visually stunning pieces too. Singing in the Rain, Broadway Melody, all of those are just stunning to look at. And then so many things happening in the background, like with Make 'em Laugh, or even just subtle things in the background where you're seeing other movies take place as they're walking along. He's just always got something to look at.
Absolutely. And I gotta say, do you think that Singing in the Rain influenced maybe directing Damien Chazelle for La La Land at all, Ray?
Oh, I think it's not just inspiration. I think it's basically a ripoff of this movie. I'm just sorry to say that for anybody the Damien Chazelle fan. I think he's overrated. I like his movies. I don't love them. That La La Land is fine. I was like, oh, this is just Singing in the Rain, cool. And it's like a modern day version of it, and Singing in the Rain does a lot better job than I think La La Land. And also the artist takes a lot of this from the talkies to the silent part of it, which the artist does. And yeah, it just goes back, taking from the well, taking from that well, just try to make movies out of other stuff. And as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of La La Land, but I think it's totally a ripoff of Singing in the Rain. Or maybe people would call it homage, but I think it's kind of a ripoff, whatever.
I wish they had ripped off the ending if that were the case.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I don't want to go too far into La La Land, but I got to the end of this, I was like, what? No. Do-over.
That one won Oscars, though.
Yeah, it did. But it reminds me of Ray did a podcast on Titanic, and you told people about the alternative ending on that, and it was like the worst alternative ending of a movie that I had heard of. I was just like, wow, that they filmed that. That was what they did. So
yeah. That's on brand for James Cameron, though, do something like that, though, like to film it. Like, we want to put this in, like, oh, no, never mind. And then, like, just totally take it out. But
no, it's a good point. Some cut scenes, though, talking about cuts, things that weren't in the movie. Early draft scripts of Sing in the Rain were sung by Reynolds, O'Connor, and Kelly. And in the end, they went to Kelly getting this solo scene of him doing it. It's an iconic scene. Again, it's kind of the icon of the movie. Or there's a lot of high points, but would you say this is what stands out as the iconic image of it, Ray?
I would say for me, I think I'm just oozing over this movie, so I apologize, everybody. But I think a lot of things stand out in this movie. For me, it's Good Morning. For me, that's the one that stands out for me as like the standout song for me, because granted, going back, my mom used to sing that song, and I didn't know what the heck she was singing. Like, what is that? What is that song that you're singing? And then now as I got older, I figured out what it was. But for me, that's what stands out. But that's an interesting scene as well. I mean, not interesting. It's a great scene as well.
Yeah, and another one that I wish had, I guess musically, I wish that it had been in there. If you check it out, there's another one called "You Are My Lucky Star" by Debbie Reynolds. She gets a solo song, but it gets cut in the movie. In a way, she's looking off into the stars, thinking about Don Lockwood's character before they actually connect and hit it off together. I see why in the movie they cut it out. I like it that she's the strong woman and that he's the one stuck on her, as opposed to her being starstruck over him. But it's still a good song. So it's like I said, I get why it didn't make the movie. The story's better that it's not in there, but it's nice that Debbie would have gotten her solo moment. She doesn't get that grand solo moment other than the final scene, but again, she's standing behind a curtain.
That's true. Yeah, I totally get that. I kind of wish she had more of a prolific role in the movie too, rather than just like sandwiched between two men. But 1952 Hollywood at the time too. So
that's right.
I am glad though that it's just Don Lockwood for Singing in the Rain. It's that love-struck, carefree attitude of, he's just thrilled with his life. And it would have been a little dampened by having two other people. And I was even thinking during Good Morning, wow, getting three people to choreograph and be in sync this entire time, that had to be ludicrously difficult. And he probably just said, you know what? We're doing that for one scene. We're not doing it any more times. I'm just going to do it because it's killing Debbie Reynolds. And it was probably killing his patience too.
Well, here's the sad thing for Debbie Reynolds. After doing all that and her feet bleeding, she popped a blood vessel, actually. It's not just like, oh, I got some blisters, like I wore some shoes that were not comfortable. It was worse than that. In keeping with the movie, large parts of her dancing are dubbed with tap dancers that sound the way they want them to sound. So some of that dancing, which obviously there's no fooling the visuals, she's doing the motions, but in order to get that, as you mentioned, Kelly he wanted that crisp, precise sound, so they dubbed the dancing.
Better than having your voice dubbed.
That's so true, yeah.
This movie really glorifies voice actors. It's funny because I was sitting there thinking when they were struggling with the taping of it, I was like, they just dubbed old actors' voices. And obviously that was part of the plot that I didn't really realize where it's going. But again, I mentioned Bond movies and it just comes back into my head. Ursula Andress didn't speak English well at all, and so they brought her on the set and they're like, what do you want us to do? And like, so they dubbed her, and the same woman who dubs her dubs several of the Bond girls in the early going. So what you see in this movie is very much part of the scene, that pretty face that was on the screen, but then you had the pretty voice behind the set backing them up. This movie is charming in that it gives them credit, whereas before I don't think you can count the voice actors that you know by name at all.
Oh yeah. I see that, and that's what I like about this movie too. It's very, like I said, tongue in cheek all through Hollywood, but maybe trying to give props to like people behind the curtain are probably more talented than people you see on screen that made this movie or made this movie. And that's what I really got out of this movie too. Watching it now is just like, yeah, that's how I felt when I got out of this movie. It's just like people in front of the screen are probably less talented than those that help create it or help make these people on screen look good.
So given that we're in the time of the transition of silent movies, we're in the late 20s here, and it's one of those things where this movie is made in the 50s and there's so much charm of this movie that is from the 50s. It's one of those things where I personally struggled with. There was mentioning of a flapper actress, and when you watch the old videos of them in the theater, like in the silent film footage, you are pulled back into the 20s, but somehow, whether it's the vibrant colors here that make you think it's the 50s, I had a struggle placing myself in the 20s. I don't know if you would agree with that. Would you say that you felt like you were in the 20s, Chad?
It's hard to say, but I mean, for the most part, I felt like the 20s where the cars looked like they were from the 1920s. The costume designer apparently had fits over this. They had worked on Gone with the Wind and said this was the hard one to do. But Sid Charisse, she shows up and she kind of looks like Maleficent in one of the scenes. I actually kind of wondered, I looked at the dates for when Maleficent was a character, and it was after this. And I kind of wonder if that dark black costume was an inspiration for it.
Hard to say. Ray, what do you think? Do you feel like you're immersed in the late 20s, or is this too much of a child of the 50s?
I think I'll go along with Chad. I'm not too sure if it's the 50s or 20s. I'm just not familiar with that style and stuff. But I felt like I was in the 20s. Maybe it's just my ignorance of the style and the history back then and what it was like. But I felt like I was transported. For me, I just felt like it transported to old Hollywood. Like there was just this vague time that I was transported to, and it was before or right before when talkies came out. Before, what's the movie they reference? The Jazz Singer.
Yes.
So before then, which is interesting that they have that. It's funny watching in 2019 that movie brought up is very interesting as well. But yeah. But anyways, I felt like I was transported to the 20s. Yeah.
Costume design. There's a lot of rich costume work in this movie. Chad, what are some of the standout wardrobe moments for you?
I think the scene with all the models displaying the different types. There were wedding dresses. It was a really hideous wedding dress, but then there were flapper styles. There were kind of long boas, and they're going through all these different genres of clothing, all these different occasions. So they really had a great chance to showcase the costume work. And again, Broadway Melody, there's so many bright costumes going on with all of the dancers there. There were probably 100 plus on screen. Sid Charisse mentioned her as well. All the costumes just really pop, and they really contribute to the movie's overall tone of just this bright, fun, energetic movie.
They do. And it's interesting to note here, the film overran its original target, and so it had a final price tag of $2.5 million, 157,000 of which is spent on Walter Plunkett's costumes alone. It's a lot of money at the time, and it is very rich and colorful. And as you mentioned, Chad, there's a scene. It seems random at the time, but it's short enough, and it seems like it's just part of the transitions into talkies. And where they go around, they have "I Love These Beautiful Women" song number, and they're really bringing out. It's like a fashion show, and it's just showing the vibrant nature of going to being able to sing on film. And they certainly brought the visuals on that scene as well. But throughout the movie, a lot of color, and it's part of the charm of the movie. Ray, do you agree that the wardrobe is part of what encapsulates this?
Oh yeah, the wardrobe in this movie is just on point, and like you said about the colors, that's what I wanted to bring up too. Is just it just pops with so much color, and you think about it was 1952, so Technicolor was a huge thing. It was really in, and this was like on point with like the costumes are bright, they're just vibrant, they're so good. Even like when Gene Kelly's singing in the rain. And, he has the hat and his coat, and it's just soaking wet, and the umbrella is just so great. The costuming and the coloring in this movie is it's fabulous. And one costume that stands out to me every time I watch this movie is just like whether at the Hollywood party, the cake scene, when she pops out and she has like these big, well, not her, but her whole group of singers have like these little puffy wrists, puffy wrist things. I don't know what you would call them. Cuffs, I don't
Muffs.
know. But yeah, something like that. Yeah, like they're just really all together. They're all very pink and very pretty, and they have gold. It's just so attention to detail. It's amazing, and you could totally tell, that they spared no expense when it came to the costumes, and it's totally awesome.
It's interesting you mentioned the Singing in the Rain sketch. This is another one of those fun old Hollywood trouble stories. They had to cover 2 outdoor blocks with blackouts to make it seem like it's a night scene, and they equipped them with overhead sprayers for Gene Kelly to perform his title number in. And there was a severe water shortage in Culver City that day, and when the sequence was shot, so they had water problems in California back then too. And unfortunately, homeowners in the area turned their lawn sprinklers on, which is why people in California usually consider xeriscaping. It's more environmentally friendly, but all the lawn sprinklers that were going off made it so that they didn't have the water pressure to do the rain work that day, so they had to come back a whole nother day. So it's a 3-day effort to do this Singing in the Rain just because they don't have enough water in Southern California at this point. So they had a hard time conjuring up the rain to sing in.
That's actually pretty good. I didn't know that.
Yeah, that you can totally tell, like the water too, when it's coming down, it's very sparse in some areas and some scenes where they cut to. Like, oh well, it looks like look like they're running out of water there, and Gene Kelly just like goes under the one that's like kind of drenching down and kind of steps away from the ones that are like kind of just dribbling down, and just really funny.
Absolutely. And there's a myth that says they mixed milk in to the raindrops to get them to show up better on camera, but this has been debunked. It was just a difficult angling of backlighting, and they had a hard time to get the rain on camera, but there's no milk in there. It does a body good, but it doesn't help the rain show up on camera any better. So
interesting. I didn't know that was a theory or whatever it was. Yeah, that would have been so gross to clean up after. It would have been nasty.
It's like the it's like the hanging little person in Wizard of Oz that they is rumored to happen. It's an urban legend.
Well, no, that Wizard of Oz thing is real though. If you look at it, it's totally real. Just kidding.
You just cue Ron Burgundy. Milk was a bad idea. Milk was a bad decision.
So this soundtrack's amazing. And Ray, you mentioned Good Morning is your top moment. Chad, what about you what musically is a high point for you musically here?
Jeez, all of them. It's so tough. I mean, Fit as a Fiddle, you mentioned it earlier. The dancing is just great when Cosmo's jumping on Don's back and they're doing those low kind of Russian kicks. Oh, that's great. The Singing in the Rain sequence is wonderful. Make 'em Laugh has all the stunt work. My personal favorite, just because of the kind of making fun of the diction coach, is Moses Supposes. And that's one of the few original songs here. But it's not even a full song in the movie, but I really enjoy them having fun with the diction coach, twirling in the robes to make themselves look like biblical times, jumping on chairs, jumping on pianos and desks. There's just so much going on in that routine. It's just the most fun for me.
Yeah, it is. And it goes all over the place, too, because you get the tender moments with songs like All I Do Is Dream of You, and you get the funny side of it with Make 'Em Laugh. And then we talked about the artistic side of Broadway Melody. And then you get like these happy-go-lucky songs like Good Morning. It actually covers quite a range. Ray, what do you feel about the music as a whole overall piece? We talked about it. It was pulled together, but are there any other high points that you wanted to call out in specific?
Like Chad said, when they're doing the speech coach, and you look at the scene in general, it looks like it's this kind of just weird. Like this looks like there's just a lot in the set. Like there's just a desk, there's some paintings, there's a couple like just whatever paintings on like mounted on the wall, and then there's curtains, and then it seems like when Gene Kelly walks in. When Cosmo walks in, and then they just like do this routine, and it's just like they pull the curtains, they do the painting, like Chad said, and like it seems like there's like so many things for them to play with, and even though when there doesn't look like there's much to play with, just so creative with the setting, and just that's what I love about that scene. It's just the creativity of it. But that song is fun too. But like I said, for me, it's just Good Morning. It's a cute, beautiful song, and I always think of it when I kind of have like a rough morning, when I wake up on the wrong side of bed. That song kind of pops in my head for a moment, and it kind of gives me a little spark. But yeah, I think the music in this movie is just it's perfect. It's so good. It's so I don't know if anybody can listen to the soundtrack and not crack a smile at any of the songs that come on, because if you don't, I'm gonna just assume you don't have a heart, because this movie just has so much heart, and it's just so fun, and it's so cute and beautiful.
You're dead inside. Yeah, I mean, Good Morning for me too is, I've mentioned it before, I sing it to my daughter every single morning when I get her up, and she kind of had this wide-eyed recognition of, this lady is singing Daddy's song. So that was fun.
Then she looked over at you like, you didn't come up with that?
Yeah, then she started asking for them to sing Jesus Loves Me, and I'm like, they don't do that one, I'm sorry, but yeah, she was very happy for Good Morning.
Yeah. This is the part of the show where we like to say, look for this. Ray, are there any fun things to find?
I think for me, if somebody's watching this movie, I would say just when you're watching the dancing scenes, just watch the feet, because the feet movement are incredible in this movie. And like you said, the tap dancing sounds are added in later, which is, I didn't know that until you said, like, wow, that's crazy. They did a really great job with the sound effects. But the footwork is just so good, and just I just pay attention to the footwork, and it's so great, and it's just something you'll get, most of us get captivated to watching the upper body, but just watch the feet, watch the movement. It's a beautiful dance with just watching the feet move back and forth, in and out, up, all that stuff. It's really cool.
Chad, look for this.
Sid Charisse, who we've talked about, she's the long-legged dancer in Broadway Melody. She had never smoked a cigarette in her life, and the opening shot with her is her smoking. She actually had to be taught how to smoke, and she found it so disgusting she never smoked again. I think it's funny, especially during the 50s when everyone's smoking, they had to bring in smoking experts and teach this young ballet dancer, here's how you smoke a cigarette.
Man, in the 50s, I thought they gave cigarettes away in like sweetened kids cereal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were passed out like candy.
Yeah. Halloween. Trick or treat, have some cigarettes.
Yeah. Here's a pack of Marlboros. There you go, kid.
Yeah. Why aren't you smoking already? So for me, I'm going to actually point out the fact that Gene Kelly was actually sick with a fever of 103 when he did the Singing in the Rain number. And we talked about him not necessarily being on the best of terms with O'Connor and showing great chemistry. I watched it closely the second time, and he doesn't look sick to me, but apparently he was sick, and those were long days for him as well at that point. Fooled me. He looks like he's having a great time.
Oh, yeah.
And then I just wanted to, on the Singing in the Rain number, there were 6 other movies where this was used in. The Hollywood Review in 1929 was where it was sung twice for the first movie that it was in. Babes in Arms in 1939. Speak Easily in 1932. The Old Dark House in 1932. Little Nellie Kelly in 1940, which was Judy Garland performing it. As I mentioned, she was considered for the casting, but then said to be too old by the time this movie rolls around, so she certainly sang it. And the Babe Ruth Story in 1948 sang it. And I should also mention, this is my second favorite movie that has the song Singing in the Rain in it. Chad, you probably know my favorite, or maybe you don't know. My favorite is What About Bob with Bill Murray.
Yeah. Very good call.
Yeah.
Nice.
Movie superlative time. Ray, you ready to hand out some awards?
Yeah, of course.
MVP.
Wow, that was really hard for me to choose the MVP. Maybe on a different day, it'd be a different person. It would, for me, though, for today, would be Jean Hagel. I think she does a great job of Miss Lamont, and just her voice is pitch, and she is so funny in this movie too, so funny. And for me, watching this movie again, I felt bad for her at the end, like she kind of got called out, which it's a just desserts, but I kind of just felt a little empathy for her. But I just like her character. You don't hate that character. You just kind of laugh at her a little bit.
You kind of love to hate her?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and she's just such a great job in that role. Even though she doesn't do any dancing, and she's one with the quote unquote no talent, I guess, when it comes to talkies and stuff.
What, they think I'm stupid or something?
Yeah, every time she talks, it's just so funny. And I think for me, that's my MVP would be to her.
Her diction scenes were great.
Yeah, it's so good.
I can't stand it. I can't stand it.
That was so good. Chad, who's your MVP?
For me, it has to be Gene Kelly. He directed this, provided the choreography, he starred in it. He's the taskmaster, but he's also the engine that makes it go.
I'm going to go with the Steel City's own Gene Kelly as well. I was leaning Debbie Reynolds my first pass to the movie, but then by the time I got to the Sing in the Rain solo number, I was just like, well, that just tipped the scales. Yeah, and when you find out that he's the director and puts it all together, yeah, I got to go Gene Kelly as well. Best Supporting Actor, Ray.
I'm going to have to go with Debbie Reynolds. I think from learning about the history about what she went through, and she's just so great. And like Chad said too, it kind of gives off the Princess Leia vibes a little bit, kind of be like the spark plug, not going to take it laying down. I don't need I'm independent too. We get that kind of vibe from her in this movie. Mm-hmm. She's just so great in this movie. And
Debbie Reynolds, I think for me is my best supporting. Yeah.
Great pick. Chad, Best Supporting Actor.
Donald O'Connor. I really love the Cosmo character. I love the relationship that he has with Dawn. I love the fast quips. You already mentioned we searched every cake in town. He has a lot of great. He has a great dad joke. It's like, Cosmo, call me a cab. You're a cab. and he's so quick with those quips, and it's just this great dialogue.
No, it's another great pick. And I would consider Gene Hagen for MVP, but I went with Gene Kelly. But I'm going to go Gene Hagen for my Best Supporting Actor. I mean, a lot of the reasons that Ray covered. She's just so funny. She does so much for the movie. She's a lovable, hateable villain character. She makes more money than Calvin and Coolidge put together.
I really don't feel like in any of these categories there was a wrong choice.
Yeah, me either.
Hidden Gem. Ray?
I'm gonna say Millard Mitchell. I'm gonna say as R.F. Simpson. I think when he's on screen, he has this deadpan look. Sorry it took so long. There's so many, I could choose anybody, but he just has this deadpan look and just like he has this tone, this like old man adult voice that I don't know, it resonates to me, and just a straight shooter, has no expression. And just plays it so well too. He's really funny in this movie, playing just a straight man.
Sorry, I love it when he and Lockwood and O'Connor all pull the rope, and then at the end, and they take such great joy in it too, as they unveil the fact that Lena Lamont is not singing. So
yeah,
Chad, who is your hidden gem?
I'm gonna go deep on this. Gwen Verdon. She provided the tap sounds during the Dancing in the Rain sequence. She actually did tap in water to create that iconic scene.
That's a deep cut. That's good credit to those you don't see. In keeping with the theme of this movie, I'm going to go with Douglas Fowley. He's the Roscoe Daxter, the crazy director who just has absolutely had it with Lena Lamont and trying to make this whole talkie thing work, and it's causing him to have acid reflux, and he just can't stand it, and the whole thing's he's high strung. And this is a great character. He adds a lot of humor in this. So small footprint in the movie, big impact.
Yeah.
Recast. If you had to recast somebody, which can be hard to do sometimes, but if you had to recast somebody, who would it be? And perhaps who might you put in their place, Ray?
I have a question. So does this person have to be like an actor or actress that was acting in, or somebody who's in 1952, or could they be like from the future or like the past more, or
it can be anything.
It can be anything. Like when you're in the 80s or the 90s or the 70s, we try and get you to stay in that era, but we're fully aware that if you did dig up somebody, that it's going to be hard to know at this point. So by all means, when you're dealing with a 50s movie, feel free to say if you remade it today, who you would put in their shoes.
Okay, if we remade this movie today, Singing, which would be a travesty, but I would say I would do, Wolverine. What's his name?
Hugh Jackman.
Yes, Hugh Jackman as Don Lockman.
Oh.
I think if they recast it, I think he would be awesome. Granted, he has done stages before in the past, and he has done musical movies, but I think he would be an interesting Don Lockwood in 2019.
Yeah,
I dig it.
Do you give him the claws?
I think so. Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Singing the Rain with claws. Yeah, everything's better with claws.
Instead of an umbrella, he has the claws, and he comes out,
Yeah.
Logan supposes.
That'd be awesome.
Chad, who is your recast?
Yeah, I thought about the obvious one with just Judy Garland since it was mentioned so much, but I think I'm going to go closer to present day. I'm going to recast Lena Lamont with Fran Drescher, another person who's beautiful but has that horrible screeching acting voice.
Yeah, that's she's known for the bad voice for sure. For me, I'm going to go with Kathleen Freeman. This is a little lower in the cast. This is as Phoebe Densmore. She's Lena's diction coach. I don't know why, in a movie where everybody made me smile, like the male diction coach made me laugh, she's just kind of there, and like, I don't know. I feel like she just takes up space. So this is a throwback. She actually was around. Maggie Smith is who I'm going to put in there, because I always just like the way Maggie Smith talks, and I could see her schooling somebody on, like, that's not how you should speak.
Okay. That other diction coach, I looked up his career. Like 90% of his career, he's playing Hitler.
Oh, well.
And then he's a diction coach.
Yeah, well, I guess you can be a diction Nazi then, so...
He was a literal grammar Nazi.
There you go. Best shot, Ray.
For me is when Don and Katie are singing in the stage, and it's like it kind of looks like Gone with the Wind type of background, and they're just singing together with the ladder, and it's just so beautiful, and it's quiet, and they're just isolated together, and it's just like the most romantic, I think for me, one of the most romantic things I've seen on film, and it just oozes with emotion, and just all the feels in that shot are just I love that so much, and that's my pick.
Great choice, Chad. Best shot.
There's a scene fairly early on when Don and Cosmo are walking past movie sets, and there are different movies being shot. It's this one long tracking shot. There's a guy sweeping in front of a painted set, then they move on, and there's people moving equipment, and then as they're walking, there's a fight on top of a trolley with people moving the background. There's also some tribes people dancing around a fire for another movie. So you get all this color, all this action, and just normal conversation. They're walking by like, yep, this is normal to have guys punching each other on top of a trolley while we just talk about Hollywood.
Sure. My best shot came during the Broadway melody. It's funny, when I watched this the first time, they have this really amazing part where the signs turn on and the camera zooms out and the stage looks like it's a million miles away. On my second time through, I fell in love with a different part, though, during the Broadway melody. The part where Sid Charisse is dancing with Gene Kelly. That's just really well shot. I mean, it's
the scandalous scene.
Yeah. Well, it is pretty steamy for the 50s, I have to admit. Yeah, and making it even steamier, I didn't mention this earlier, but that white dress that Sid has on, she was revealing through it, and her dark pubic hair was showing, so they had to go back to wardrobe and add some layers there to hide it. And allegedly, according to the internet, the head of wardrobe came out and said, "All right, guys, we've got Sid's crotch licked. We're ready to go."
Oh, jeez. They did have to. There is a scene you can tell during that sequence that actually got cut. There's this weird jump in it, and it apparently was when she wrapped her legs around him. That got cut out, and so they had to resync the audio.
Interesting. Okay. Wardrobe malfunction. But anyway, it's the long shot scene where they're dancing. They have these steps. They're really well done. They're wrapped up in that white robe. That is a great shot. And that's my shot of the movie. So, best scene, though, Ray.
This is a really quick scene, and probably a lot of people wouldn't even think about it. But for me, I always found the scene where with Don's in the car, and then he jumps out of the car and hops on another car, and then goes onto the trolley, and the trolley just goes away. I was like, that's really cool. I wonder if he actually did that, or we're pretty sure he probably really did that. But it's like, that's really parkour back in 1952. I thought it was really cool. It's not a long scene, not a singing scene, but that's one that always kind of amazed me. Cause just being older man doing that seems so much work, and it makes me tired looking at it too, just watching him do that. But I think that's a really cool shot or scene.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. Like, was there a stunt double? But there really wasn't any time or cut that it could have been. I think he really did it.
Yeah, that's so crazy and so awesome that he did that, maybe? But I'm pretty sure. I'm going to say he did, but yeah.
Chad, best scene.
I've already talked about it a little bit, but the Moses Supposes part.
Really?
Just everything about that routine, the difficulty, the set pieces. We've covered it. It's just, it makes me happy.
Wow, didn't see that one coming. Well, since nobody picked it, I have to go with the Singing in the Rain sketch, or not sketch, but the clip where Gene Kelly is, pleased, even though he's in a torrential downpour and things aren't really going his way. Something, he found a light at the end of the tunnel, and he's pretty happy about it. So he dances in the rain. It's the moment of the movie for me. Change one thing. If you had to change something, Ray, what would it be?
We're all going to hammer the same thing.
For me, I'm going to be one of those people who's like, I could change. I know what part you guys are going to talk about it. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to be in the middle of like, I don't want to change anything about this movie. It has a flaw, or maybe a flaw or two, but I just think it's so beautiful. It's just so fun. I think it's for everybody. So I'm going to be lame and be like, I would change nothing.
Well, you gotta say something. So Ray's saying there's not. Yeah, Ray's saying there's not enough smoking in this movie. That's what he's.
There definitely be a lot more smoking.
More smoking.
Sure.
Yeah. Chad, what is your change one thing?
Yeah, I'll go after Broadway Melody. 17 minutes, and it's 17 minutes without Donald O'Connor, without Debbie Reynolds, due to scheduling conflicts for the former and due to dancing ability for the latter. I missed them a lot. It's just too much time to be away, and we're just dwelling too much. It does set up a great joke at the end, but I think you could have made that joke after like 7 or 8 minutes.
Yeah, ditto. I mentioned it earlier. Broadway Melody doesn't fit the movie. It's beautiful, and I'm glad I watched it, and I had a great time doing it, but I felt like I watched another movie for a second and then came back and watched Singing in the Rain. So I'm with Chad on that one. And it just has to do with fit. Best quote, though. Ray, what is your favorite quote of this movie?
There are so many good one-liners, but for me, it's when Cosmo Brown says, Lena, she can't act, she can't sing, she can't dance, a triple threat. And every time I hear that, I laugh out loud so hard. And it's just like, I don't know why. He just says it so quick. It's such a good dagger shot. It's just so funny. That's my favorite quote of this movie. It's so good.
Chad, what is your favorite quote?
I'd rather kiss a tarantula. You don't mean that. Hey, Joe, bring me a tarantula.
Their banter is great. For me, this one may not have hit the top of the list, but when Don Lockwood goes looking for Kathy at the party, and she's been upset by him kind of razzing her for being a cake dancer, he goes in the back room where the other women are, and they're alarmed at first, and Don Lockwood's frantic to find Kathy, and he goes up to one of the dancers and he says, "Where did Miss Selden go?" And the dancer says, "She grabbed her things and she bolted right away. Is there anything I can do for you?" Because she's into him. And he goes, "Sorry, I don't have time to find out."
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, it's timing, it's the scene, it's the pace of it, and it's delivered beautifully. So that really cracked me up. And he does it all with dignity. Ray, do you want to remind people one more time where they can hear more from you?
Yeah, if you're interested, you could look on your favorite podcasting app and look up Retro Reviews. That's the podcast I'm on, and my co-host Peter. We just, every cut comes out every Thursday. We drop a new episode, and if you want our social media stuff, you can find it on our podcast. I'm not going to give all that right now, but just hope you find us and listen to us well with Retro Reviews Roundtable. Hopefully you subscribe too.
They pair well together. So, this is the moment of truth. On a 5-star scale, you can go half stars, by the way. I don't know, 5 umbrellas or scale or whatever. That's more along. Ray always does fun, creative scales there. So, how many umbrellas?
Thank you for saying creative. I appreciate that.
Yes. How many umbrellas do you give Singing in the Rain, Ray?
Wow, man, this is a hard one for me. I haven't talked about this movie a lot in great detail and how much I like it. So I don't know. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. 5 out of 5 umbrellas. This movie, I think, is for everybody. You could show it to, like Chad did, show it to his wife and his kid, and I think it's a perfect movie for kids to watch. An hour and a half, has song, dancing, lots of colors, and also great for adults. Get a lot out of it. It's just, I think it's a great movie. I think it's even if it does have a flaw or flaw or two, I think it's the everything else, the casting and the singing, and everything is just. It just overwhelms me with joy every time I watch it, especially in the time we're in now. I'd love to watch a movie like this to make me smile. So I would give it 5 out of 5.
A good time was had here. Chad, where are you going to go on this one?
I'm grinning like an idiot through most of this movie. And even some of the things that seem like they're just weird spoofs that would never happen actually wind up happening. Like Lena's voice that happened to the guy that played Darth Vader. His name's David Prowse. He didn't know his voice was going to be replaced. They get James Earl Jones. So, I mean, it's topically relevant. It's satirical. It's very, very funny. The songs are great. Just everything is charming. Everyone gets along on screen anyways. So for me, it's 5 out of 5.
Okay. And perhaps just because I'm new to this one and I don't have the built-up appreciation, because I tend to grow in appreciation with the movie over time, I'm giving this 4 out of 5 umbrellas. And
oh wow!
How dare you?
Well, I'll explain. And it's the Broadway melody, and I know that's. I didn't realize it was 17 minutes until you quantified it, and that is the part that I just go. It's too indulgent, and it pulled me out of the movie to the point where, like I said, I literally had to look over to my wife and be like, "I'm sorry, was I not paying attention or something? I'm really trying here. They were talking about what they were going to do in the movie. What is all this?" And she goes, "This is their idea for what they want to do in the movie." I was like, "It can't be. It's a Renaissance thing." And it was like, so.
Did you not enjoy Two-Face? The guy with the burnt scar flipping his coin?
That's exactly what I thought too. It was like, that's supposed to be like a DC or Two-Face character. It's really funny.
I think he was around back then, actually, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, 4.5's really good, and there's room to grow. So the water can keep rising, and
that's all right. They didn't give this any Oscars at first, and now the Oscars are often wrong.
They are. It's one of those things where you look back on it and you go like, wow. How'd that happen? So, you know what won't be wrong, though? The choice that you helped me make for next week, Chad. I have a director special here. We're going to do a Christopher Nolan movie for next week. You ready to help me pick one?
I'm ready.
Option 1, Following from 1998. A young writer who follows strangers for material meets a thief who takes him under his wing. Option 2, The Prestige from 2006. After a tragic accident, 2 stage musicians engage in a battle to create the ultimate illusion while sacrificing everything they have to outwit each other. And option number 3, Memento from 2000. A man with a short-term memory loss attempts to track down his wife's murderer. So, Chad, what's it going to be? The Following, The Prestige, or Memento?
I love The Prestige. I'm excited to revisit it, so let's go with The Prestige.
Well, The Prestige it'll be. Ray, one last time, thank you for coming to join us.
Oh, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it, and thank your listeners for listening to me rant about the movies with you guys. And I love your podcast too. And thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it. Hopefully, I could be on again some other time.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ray.
Sounds great, and I can't think of any better places than Pittsburgh and Seattle to sing in the rain together. So remember, all the lords, ladies, and knights of the Retro Movie Roundtable, we invite you to reach out to us. We want to hear from you. So subscribe, rate, review on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a like on Facebook. Email us at retromovieroundtable@yahoo.com. And now we're on Twitter, so search Retro Movie Roundtable there. And as always, thank you for listening. Be good to each other and watch more movies. Chad?
Moses supposes his toes are roses, but Moses supposes erroneously. And Moses, he knows his toes aren't roses, as Moses supposes his toes is to be.